Here we go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Faces Friday. I'm Jacob Hackett, your host. Tonight's subject is a very important one. It's giving children and adults a voice. This is a topic that's been on the minds of many since the ADA was adopted in 1990. Joining me today is Susan Coll, a friend of Faces for Autism, who has fought for a very long time to get this law put into place so all children and adults can have a voice. Susan, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Appreciate it.
So, Susan, for those that don't know the Olmstead Law, please explain what that is.
I think about this in terms of, how it's sort of amazing to think about how short of a time this has been since this went into being. So it was a Supreme Court decision that happened around 1999, 2000, and it was somebody who was, in an institutional setting who said, I'm sorry, the names have escaped me. We should be able to live, right? We shouldn't be institutionalized just because of our disabilities. We should be able to live out in the community. And to be supported and to have supports to live out in the community. And it actually went, it's funny that it's called, it's Lois Curtis and there was another person, but it's funny it's called Olmstead because Olmstead is the person who's like, no, it's actually like cheaper and better for us to have like institutional settings and to place people there. And it's remembered as Olmstead, but really Lois Curtis, who was an amazing figure now that we look back on it, and was an artist in her own right. And she won the right. And she won the right not only for herself to live in the community, but for other people. And for that to be the first place that we look, and then to be offering supports. And then for the last place to be considered to be institutional settings. And I think about over the last 20 years, what's happened. It's been very interesting, right? Which is sort of the closing of institutions and the defunding of institutions and the establishing of more community-based places for people with disabilities to live. But we're still 20, 25 years later, not everybody's needs are being met. And I think specifically for me, when I think about this, it's the, and we've been called this, our family's been called this, like the outliers. So it's the people on the two extremes, which are the people with the most complex medical disabilities and the people with the most complex behavioral disabilities, who still are the people who are kind of being directed into those more restrictive settings.
And truthfully, that is a sin. That's where we have to go. And I've worked in transition since since the pandemic, and I've met with parents, and you ask them the $1 million question. The $1 million question is, what do you want your child? What's going to happen when your child gets out of school? And the answer is, I can't take care of him or her anymore because her behaviors have gotten so severe, or they've changed dramatically, that they have to go into an institutionalized setting. And you sit there and you wonder, don't you want to try them at home before that's the ultimate answer? And I mean, you don't hear much about institutions now, thank God, but it's going to be a fear for as long as you're the rest of your life, my life, anyone watching this, because like I said to you before we started, to just get something as simple as respite care is so hard.
Yeah. I think about like the options that they have now, and I think a lot of people are getting their needs met now compared to, like 20 or 30 years ago, and there's way more options now for people. But for us, I think about our situation and just how life changes at 21, how transition is so difficult, but also how Medicaid changes after 21. So it really does favor, more restrictive settings for people and sort of less creativity. And I think about, yeah, I think a lot of people are getting their needs met in apartments or group homes, but when I tour those places and I'm thinking about Alex and him needing one-to-one skilled nursing, none of those places are offering it. And so we have such limited choices. Basically, anybody who needs that one-to-one care is not going to be able to get that outside of their own home. So it's almost like, how are we then maintaining this home so that he could stay where he wants? But it's not supported by any of the programs. So Medicaid will allow 16 hours of nursing. So we have to find somebody who will take on those 8 hours, which as a parent, I'm happy to do that. But then what happens when I'm no longer able to do that? And then we have to look into something that's it's not only that it's more restrictive, it's the care will be less care. So to go from one-to-one care to 1-to-4 care in a medical group home, and what the day looks like. Or when we toured an ICF care facility, and the care was one nurse for 16 people. And basically what the day looked like was everybody gets up out of bed at 7 a.m. And immediately I was like, what if he wants to sleep in? Right? And just like simple things like, what if you want to sleep in that day? Maybe you don't want to get up at 7 a.m. Everybody's getting up at 7 a.m. and you're sitting in the chair, and everybody's having breakfast at 8 a.m., whether you want to or not. Like, that is the schedule of the day. And even during the time we were touring, we're hearing, announcements of like, now it's time to go into this space. Now it's time for this, over like they're announcing these things. And I'm like, but what if you don't want to do that, right? Like, we're so used to a self-directed life here that we just can't even wrap our brains around when you're in those settings, that it's not about your choice of what you want to do. This is what they're doing. You're going to do it at the time that they're telling you to do it. And to me, it sounds like a prison. It sounds like a prison. And I don't want that for Alex. And I don't think he would do well there. I don't think he would do even 1 week in those settings and do well.
No, because just as you told me, if he has a bad night because of insomnia, or you 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 can't you can't force it on them, and you can't magically turn off their internal clock and say, okay, it's 8:00:00 on the clock, on the dot. It's time for bed. Maybe one's not ready for bed by 8 o'clock at night. What are you going to have to what are you going to toss and turn the entire night because your internal clock is just not ready to go? And I mean, some people would probably, as I said, do wonderful with that. And then some people like Alex or myself would probably be like, I don't want this demanded schedule. If I want to go out, get a job, do whatever I have to do, and I can't do it because it's something just as simple as that, then what do you do?
Isn't it? It's so interesting because it's just that simple. It is, I just want to live life the way I want to live life, right? I just want the freedom that everybody else enjoys to choose how I spend my time, and my day, and not have somebody go in there and like turn the lights out and be like, time's up, go to bed. We're all going to bed, right? There's times where Alex, it might be midnight or something, and we're like, I want to go to bed. I want everybody to go to bed. But I'm like, you know what? He's an adult now. He's an adult, and he could stay up. It's okay. And I think that's like another issue of not seeing people as adults, if they have an intellectual disability, and not allowing them to do things, sort of like this sort of perpetual childhood. But allowing him to make choices and to live life and to have that freedom, that's all that I think about, that law, like giving you the civil right to choose your life and to be able to live in the community and to go to a store and to spend your time in a way that's meaningful for you. That is the right that happened, that came through with Olmsted. And I think about that as being like 1999 or the year 2000, right? Like it's not that long that people have had that right.
No, and you would think just by with technology, with housing now, you would think that Olmsted would have came around in like 90 when the ADA was adapted, or because if you ask me, I was born right around when Olmsted was enacted. It almost feels like they were a little late to the party, if you know what I mean.
I think so. I think that um it was a little late to the party. Who gets to have like civil rights and human rights and to like live in a way that they want to do. I think about that. And Alex was born in the year 2000. So this was in the news when he was an infant. And I remember when he was born that right when I was in the hospital, another mom was sent to me, somebody who worked in the hospital, and they were like, hey, this woman just had a baby with Down syndrome, go talk to her because you have an 18-year-old who has Down syndrome. And she came to me and she said, I want to sit down with you, because she could see that I was just like confused and I didn't know what happened. They took the baby, they ran away with the baby for like 12 hours. We didn't see Alex and nobody told us what was happening, and they put like signs on our door of like, don't bother us. And then this stranger comes into my room to talk to me, and she's like, I want to tell you, 18 years ago when I had my son, they asked me if I wanted to take him home or not, and it was okay to leave him, and that he would be basically sent away, and it would be okay. And I just thought, wow, and I remember her saying too, she's like, I want to let you know, he votes. He votes and he lives a life that he enjoys. And that, it stuck with me. I was like, whoa, yeah, nobody is saying to me like, you have a choice, like keep your kid or take them home. It was like, I'm taking my baby home. So how times have changed. And I feel like every 20 years now, when I like tell stories like this to people, sort of like, and like the younger generations are like shocked and they're like super shocked. And I'm like, I'm so glad that you're shocked. I'm so glad that you're shocked. Because when you talk to like the older generations of people, they're like, yeah, this is the way life was.
Yeah,
We just accepted it. That was the way it was. And like part of like what's interesting about our story too is that when I was born, I'm 1973, and I'm adopted. And when I got my adoption story and records from the state, it was that I was sent away. They thought I had Down syndrome, and they sent me away until they figured out that I didn't have Down syndrome in the 1970s. And then they held me for a couple of months, and then they put me, I don't know, bounced back and was able to be considered an adoptable baby. So like these things of like, oh my gosh, this happened personally to me, even that like people were making decisions about what I could do, what I was capable of, my entire life trajectory. Within minutes of me being born, people had made a decision that I had nothing good to offer or to contribute, and that I would be a drain on society. And they made that decision within like hours of me entering, the planet. And that just breaks my heart. And when I think about Alex, being born, being very sick, but through education and his therapies and being loved and adored, we adore him, we treat him like a prince, right? How much he has grown and how brilliant he is. He's brilliant. And I see that like physically, like he may not be able to do as much, or sometimes his communication is hard to understand, but that because we have loved him and cared for him, and he's been exposed to the world and gone out to museums and traveled, and seen things and had the right to an education, and a beautiful education, that he knows how to swim, all these things, that there's so much human potential, and that we should never be limiting people just based on a category, a genetic a diagnosis. We don't know what people are capable of doing. But what I have learned is that if we do nothing and we make a decision that people can't do anything, and then we just stop working with them, that they absolutely will never get above that level, that they will not grow. that you have to like keep working with people and like trying. And that's what I've learned through Alex.
Yeah, and just I commend you. I commend Mike for, because, and I'll have you go, if you don't mind, go into what transpired over the last two, oh, I don't know the exact numbers, so I'll put it nicely and say 200 plus days last year. I mean, traveling up and down, wondering day in, day out. And it's just because modes of care and needs of care aren't set up appropriate. I mean, I read your story every day. I would see something and I would go, how is it not set up? I mean, send the poor kid home, but go ahead. I'll stop. You. So, for those that don't know what happened last year, please explain.
Sure.
Please explain.
It's such a bizarre situation of Alex got hurt at home. He fell in the bathroom. And for people with Down syndrome, they have this sort of this instability in their neck. And we're told once your baby's born, you have a person with Down syndrome. The whole Down syndrome community knows this. They're like, oh, watch out for the neck. Don't go on a trampoline. Be careful. And he tripped on his pajama pants in the bathroom, and that was enough to set off this little piece in his neck, C1, C2, and it was like twisted. And we didn't know right away. He was like, he was hurt. He went to bed, and then in the middle of the night, he called for us. And we went into the room and we saw he couldn't move his arms and legs. And we were like, oh my goodness, what has happened here? So we ended up even though he was 21 at the time, we ended up at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. It's the only place that we really trust. And they put a neck brace on him. They're like, he's going to need surgery. And basically what ended up happening was they put him in traction. And I knew it was a bad idea because he's broken a femur before. And they said to me, when he broke his femur when he was 8 years old, they said, you have a choice. You could do 5 weeks in traction where we have these weights pulling your bones, and I'm like, that sounds terrible. Right? It sounds really terrible. 5 weeks of like sitting in a bed with that, or you could do a surgery and you'll go home in 5 days. So I remember from that time, and we were like, we're doing the surgery. And it was perfect. So when they said, put him in traction, I was like, this doesn't sound like a good thing. And they put on a rope behind his neck, like trying to straighten out his neck by pulling like a 10-pound, like a weight that you would see like in a weight room, like just bizarre. So during that stress of traction, he ended up getting the flu. So we're waiting for surgery. He gets the flu. I remember even that day, they were like, maybe you should go home while we're waiting for surgery. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? He got the flu. It went into pneumonia. And then it went into pneumatosis, which then, this is like in 3 days this happened. And then it went into intestinal failure. And this whole odyssey of being so incredibly sick that we were basically asking for hospice. And during this time, it was really interesting because he still hadn't had the surgery to correct the C1, C2 problem. And then we were being like placed in a situation of having to meet with ethics boards to decide the fate, because Alex has Down syndrome. He's in a protected class with a genetic disability. So we can't just like make decisions. We all have to like come together in a group of 30 people in a room and make a decision together of what is the most ethical thing to do. So he ended up on something called TPN because he couldn't do his tube feeds. He is G-tube fed. He couldn't handle that with intestinal failure. He did TPN, which is being fed through an IV, but it's like enough that you can live off of that. Within probably 3 or 4 days, he went septic. He got a fungal infection through that. And so they had to take the TPN out. He only had an IV, and he lived for 30 days on fluids alone. It was just remarkable, like the human spirit of like being so sick, you're in intestinal failure, so you cannot eat anything. You're getting no nutrition, but you're hydrated only. And he was able to survive in a bed with a neck brace on for 30 days. So we still at this point had not had the surgery to fix his neck. So we're just in this place of what is going on. And somehow during this time, DDD is involved with us, the group that provides adult services. And we're all like, when Alex comes home, he's going to need 2-to-1 care. He's going to need a hospital bed. Like, he's really like very sick now. And then DDD basically saying, we can't provide that. You would have to go to a facility for that. And the thing is, I have to say, in the beginning, I believed them. I believed that they could not provide the care at home. And so I went to see the care facility. I went to see medical group homes. We went to, interviewed with Bancroft. We got rejected from Matheny. We kind of like went through all these things and this odyssey of looking at like places that they send people to that didn't actually offer 2-to-1 care either. None of these places did. They actually were worse than what we would do at home. And so somewhere at that point was probably 100, 150 days in the hospital, still waiting to have surgery, is when I decided, I was like, I am not going to send him away. I do not see anybody who could do the level of care that he needs and do right by him and allow him to live the life that he wants to do. So I'm now going to change course here and say, we want him to come home, and he deserves to come home. And if he needs 2-to-1 care, then that's what we need to do. And if he needs a hospital bed, that's what we need to do. In March, so he went in December. In March, he finally had the surgery. He recovered from the surgery. And then we ended up being sort of stuck in the hospital for 297 days, probably, 200 days after we needed to be there, just because we were basically asserting our right to live at home. After seeing like he will not thrive and he will not survive with a rate of 1 nurse to 16. He won't do good in one of these group homes that didn't even have a nurse. They had a nurse who supervised the house, but the direct care wasn't even provided by nurses, so that wasn't appropriate for him either. And it was just us basically going to our county commissioners and to the senator and to the governor and to anybody, to the media, anybody who would listen, and me posting on Facebook every single day for 400 or 500 people who followed the story of, let's bring Alex home and give him what he needs and the budget he needs. And another thing that's really important about this, that kind of gets lost because it's hard for people to understand. In New Jersey, we have the Medicaid waiver programs that help people have a budget to live their lives if you're in the DDD system. And there's 3, but there's 2 main ones that most people are in. It's the supports budget, and it's something called CCP. And a big part of our argument was Alex's whole life, he had something called CCW, which was the community care waiver. And when he turned 21, they took that DDD, took it away to put him in supports plus private duty nursing. And what that ended up doing was it essentially wiped out 75% of his budget, so that he was unable to do anything or have appropriate care. So another big part of our argument was he needs care at his home. We need a hospital bed that's the appropriate hospital bed. And he needs the appropriate budget to fund his care in our house, which is basically he needs a CCP budget, but he needs the nursing care. And the way that the waivers are written now, and this could be changed. It can absolutely be changed. This is policy. This is not a law. This is just people have made this decision to do this, to lock people who need nursing care out of their budgets. And it was, you know what? We want to go to our house. We want to have our CCP budget, and we want nursing care. And we're not going to leave this hospital until that happens. I mean, it got really basically down to that, where the hospital ended up being an embassy. And I have to say too, that I really looked at the history of like disability rights and Judy Heumann and what people had to do even just to get 504 passed. And that helped me tremendously when I saw people were throwing their bodies on the steps in Washington, D.C., and people getting arrested in their wheelchairs with their arms like placed behind them and people pushing them. when I saw that, I realized like we're going to have to do something extreme. And because we were out of state and because we were at CHOP, which is like world class, they allowed us to use that hospital as an embassy, while every week we met with the Ombudsman, Disability Rights New Jersey, and DDD, and we tried to hash out some kind of agreement to be able to bring Alex home. But I really honestly believe that if we were in New Jersey, in a New Jersey hospital, that it would have never happened, and that Alex would be in some facility, not even near our house, just like hours away. Like it's basically what happens is when there's a major problem like this, and they find find an open bed anywhere in the state, and it's rarely near where you live. So I think that when I reflect back on all this, and now that we're out of it, I'm like, woof, like you could succinctly tell the story in like 5 minutes. But I think about how desperate we were, how depressed we were, how difficult it was to maintain a home here and live at the hospital, because the expense of traveling between Philadelphia and here, and that Alex didn't have a one-on-one there. So we had to have one parent with him at all times, and how difficult that was, and how I was trying to maintain my work, and how difficult that was. And the amount of sacrifice that it took. And there were some very dark days. There were absolutely days of complete despair as we saw nobody cares about us, in the government. But I have to say, our local community and the way that people rallied and the way the faces took care of us was miraculous. And I will never forget that. I will never forget the people who were there for us. And I will never forget the people who turned their backs on us after that time. I learned a lot. People talk about grit or digging deep or like getting absolutely burned to the ground and then like rising back up. That was that experience of like Alex coming back from being 89 pounds and just bones, and he's now 130 pounds. And vibrant looking, how he came back and he didn't give up, and he just kept saying, I want to go home. And I'm like, okay, Alex, you want to go home. We're going to make this happen. We're not going to give up. But the fact that it took 297 days, and going to the governor multiple times, to the senator multiple times, to the media multiple times, and a federal Olmstead complaint that's still open, and settle and all of this it's still not over. We still meet with everybody. We're still trying to hash these things out. So this has taken like overall probably years. It's taking years to like work through this, but none of this would have been possible, right? Unless we had Olmstead, ADA, 504, all of those things. All of us, Alex and I, would have just disappeared into some place if we didn't have that. If we didn't have this, I'm going to hold on to, we have rights, and we're going to exercise our rights, and we're going to hold on until you come to your senses and realize like that this is the right thing. And so since October 3rd, Alex came home. And in the end, the only thing that has really worked out for us is Bayada Nursing. There's really not anything else in our program that we've been able to find for him. And what's so interesting about this is because so many like day programs are community based, they have a limit on how many people in wheelchairs they'll take. So it's sort of shocking that we get we're ineligible for like a lot of things just based on wheelchair use. And so I just think about, we're happy, we're home, we're an intact family. It's been amazing. That part of it's been amazing. We have the nursing care that we need. We have the budget, but we're still not able to use all of the resources we have because we're in Atlantic County, because he uses a wheelchair, all these things. But part of like my work moving forward is to make sure that the way that CCP is written, that it gets changed, the wording gets changed to allow nursing care, so that people who have CCP, and this has happened in our community, in our greater community, and I've watched this happen, don't have to make the choice of giving up their waiver and giving away their budget just to live and have nursing care if they are sick. You should not have to give up your waiver and give up 75% of your budget, and go back on a wait list to get your budget back when you're healthy and can return to CCP. So that's kind of me moving forward, what I want to like put my advocacy work towards.
Yeah, and I mean, just going going through what you went through for those 200 plus days. No one should have to do that, especially if the end goal is all he wanted was to go back to his home. It was not, it's not, to me, to us sitting here this morning, does not seem like that is that hard of a mountain to climb or a pill to swallow. But yet, you have situations like, excuse me, like that, where that's sadly that's how it goes. And this has nothing to do with the situation, but you also have two other children.
Yes.
How did they? How did they? How did they? That was another part of the story, which I'll have you tell now. How did they adapt to? I really hate as this is coming out of my mouth, but it's best to basically not. You and Mike were there, but it was almost like they didn't. You and Mike were there, but you weren't there at the same time because you were in Philly. So how'd that go?
I remember we had to like make a decision at Christmas, even like who was going to be home and who was going to be with the kids, who's going to be at the hospital and who was going to be with the kids at home. And we were like, okay, you're going to tell Mike, like, you're going to be at the hospital, you're going to FaceTime for Christmas, and it'll be fine. So, I think over the years, people will often say, like, when you have like somebody who's sick at home or has like complex needs, they'll be like, did it create trauma? Were other people traumatized by that? And over the years, I'd be like, you know what? These kids actually are like really super well adjusted. We're all like doing all right because we had nursing care and he had school and he had like everybody had their lives and we did all right. Definitely like this experience created trauma. And the way that I saw it, or the way I see it now, is like with my older son, like the middle son, um sort of being hyper responsible, like, I don't need anything, I don't need new clothes, I don't need new shoes. And I'm like, you need new shoes, come on, you do, like, doesn't want to be a bother or a burden, right? Because he saw that we went through a lot. And then I feel like the younger one was probably like the complete opposite, which is like, I need all these things, I need more things, I need like toys and stuff and more stuff, and like more of that sort of emotional, like, I feel like they are actually like opposite kind of people. But it was definitely like super traumatic. And even for me, I feel like this year, this summer especially, we're talking about how the summer is so disorienting to not have a schedule, that I I was teaching this year as a professor, so I'm on the semesters. So when school ended in May, I feel like I just stayed in bed for like half of May and all of June. I feel like I just was like decompressing to like just to like handle that whole last year, and just like a place of nothingness and silence to just shake it off. Like, it's really trauma, right? How do people work through, it was traumatic, um and how do you work through that and hopefully come through like the other side in a healthier way to like use it and be hopefully empowered by it, or learn something from it and not just destroyed by it. That's the challenge.
Yeah, and to get your lives back to some sort, well, not some sort, to get your lives back to what you know, get your lives back to normal. I mean, wondering day in, day out, you and Mike are in Philly, Mike teaches, you teach. The simplest of things, Susan. How are the kids getting to school today? It's it's how's this going to work? And then you get it. I remember reading you were up in Philly or something, you were working, and then you get a call that they both get sick, or I mean, and then you wonder, what am I going to do? And it's not only is it trauma, but there's also an extreme emotional aspect to it too.
Gosh, I know even you saying that, I'm like, wow, how did we make it through that? That was terrible.
Right,
Right?
right.
Right? Because now it's like the time of like milk and honey of like the summertime, right? And nobody, right now it's just like, oh, everybody's here and we're all safe. Gosh, right? I think that like what I learned through that too is like you just keep going, right? And you don't want to, but you just keep going. I would just be like, it's like this idea of like going through this dark tunnel and you're eventually going to get out. But I'm like, this is the longest tunnel ever. Like, what is going on here? Like, whenever you're like, I think this is the end. No, it's not the end. It's like another 30 days here, right? Sometimes I think, like too, the stories of like people who were wrongly like imprisoned, right? And did like years in prison and how they made it through, right? Those are the things that I had to like get my mind wrapped around to be able to get through that experience. That's how hard it was.
Yeah, and your kids are. I know Alex is out of school. Uh, your other two, how old are they now?
Yeah, 13 and 10.
Oh wow, wow. So so your middle is on his way. No, one more year on his way to high school. Where are we at
Yep,
now?
8th grade, and the youngest is going into 5th grade.
This
Big, big little kids.
big little kids, but it's just really makes you wonder. And like you said, thank God. Well, not thank God, but faces stepped up. You had people stepping up to take care of the kids. You had meal trains. You had the sill was extremely supportive. I remember because I was on the board during all that when that went on.
Made such a
And
difference to know that people cared about us.
yeah, yeah.
It really did. And people checking in, or people like our neighbor would bring over donuts, like it's just like little things. I'm like, thank you. I thank you. Reward me with a donut. Like I will keep going right? We'll survive on donuts. Just like anything that people did for us, it was a miracle. It was an absolute miracle. And I know that we could not have like gotten through this without community support. And the things that people said, I'm like, oh my gosh, these are things that people say at funerals. I'm like, I get to hear like the nice things while I'm still alive. I was like, oh, I'm so lucky to like be able to hear the nice things while I'm still alive. Right. And it's funny, the Facebook, I did the story on Facebook and I made a point to post every day and number every day. Somehow I knew like, I don't know. I knew it was going to be some kind of crazy odyssey, but I also did it because I knew that it was going to come up as a memory and it wasn't going to be lost. And that someday it would be over and I would be able to see the stories again. And every day I do, I'll check in maybe 3-4 times a week. I'll check in on my memories and see like where I was last year, on the story, and be like, "Whoo, we're in a much better place today." Um, of like, where at what point in the story we were trapped, and how we were going to get out of it. But it was just such a crazy experience, and it really shaped me as a person to really think about like, um, understanding people and just allowing people to have a certain amount of freedom and choice, and just basic, right? Just that's enough for happiness. That's all it takes for happiness.
Yep. Now that you have the nursing supports and everything else, now that life is returning back to what I would like to call normal, uh, are you and might like you can do things with the other kids now. You can do things with Alex. You can do some self-care that was lost in the last year.
Go shopping. You know, the one thing that is like very interesting about our lives, even with this, we're thrilled he's home and we're happy he's home, but we always have to say we are on house arrest, because you can only get 16 hours a day of nursing, and we have to do eight hours minimum, and we cover the open shifts. We can't like leave our house overnight. So that's like the only thing, like that's this. So, and it's funny, like, 'cause when I talk to Mike about it, he's like, I'm good. He's like, I could stay here. I don't need to. But for me, I definitely take respite breaks on my own. I just kind of go and I go, there's something called A Mother's Rest, which is a nonprofit group. And I will go out and meet other moms and we'll go out to dinner and we will like stay in this little house. And sometimes we're all strangers, but the connection is that we are caregivers. And I have respite breaks pretty regularly. And then it seems like my older one, my middle guy, he and I will go on our adventures together, and leave everybody else at home. But you know, we'll go like, where do we go? Boston. We drove to Pittsburgh, trying to go do fun stuff. But this idea of like we can't really leave, and Alex doesn't travel well because he's sick and he needs a lot of medical care. Um, so that piece of it is sort of like a very bizarre lifestyle of sort of Cinderella, like, you know, the pumpkin, and you know, you have to be home before midnight. Well, we have to be home before 11 because the nursing shifts end at 11. So you are allowed out of your house between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. only. And then you have to be there to provide like overnight care. So it's a very interesting lifestyle.
Yes, and now with the overnight care, is it just so that you mentioned overnight care? I'm trying so that people watching this get a visual. I'm sure I'm sure it's not that much. Is it because he's awake and if he needs something, you're probably right down the hall. Not
Yes.
even so.
Yeah. So it's like you know, it's like change his briefs, change the bed, um, medicine, because he's in a lot of pain with the neck fusion, even though it was successful, so he's safe, his neck is safe, it's not going to cause paralysis. Um, it's kind of sad that he's in almost constant pain. So, and it's trying to figure out like which medications to give. So we couldn't have like a family member, right? We couldn't have like family stay here and like take care of Alex. You definitely need like overnight nursing. And that's why when we're trying to work out respite, there's really like, we're like, gosh, where could we get respite? And then we're like, the hospital. The hospital is like a good form of respite. And then we're like, we can't just like check into the hospital. Right. So, but some of the nurses were like, oh, if you need to get away for a couple of days, we'll do overnight. We'll work it out. So you'll get 24 hours. So like we've been having those conversations. Because DDD was saying, let's go to Woodbine, go to the developmental center. And then when we toured it, um, people have good intentions, but it's absolutely defunded. And it's a time capsule of the 1970s and 80s, and nothing has been updated since then. But they tried. I mean, they tried to like keep it clean and shiny, but it is honestly stepping back in time. Um, and there is nothing updated or new there. And it's not really appropriate.
No, and you want to step forward in time, and stepping back in time is not in the right direction. So yeah, this things have got to get better. As we said, Susan has essentially published a storybook for you to read on social media of her journey and the kids' journeys over the last 200 days. To say what you went through is nothing short of to to do what you had to do to get Alex home. See, this is why you need laws like the Olmstead Law to make sure that someone's quality of life is met.
حبيبتي
Is met
ازيك يا قمر؟
because
الحمد لله
because
نشكر ربنا.
it not only is it
ايه
sad,
الاخبار؟
not only
طمنينا.
is it sad, but it's also scary, as we talked before we started.
لا ما طلبتش حاجه منه خالص، الزيت بس.
So continue fighting for the Olmstead Law. The ADA is out there.
16,000 يعني ايه يا صاحبي؟
Susan,
يعني 100
before
مثلا؟
we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts you would
ما
like
اعرفش
to
انا
share
ما
with
يعني
the
انا قلت له زيت
audience?
بس اللي عاوزه.
Oh, thanks, Jacob. I think, yeah, I
يا
think
ساره
a really important point
ادي يا حبيبتي اللي انت عاوزاه وهاتي
for
اللي انت
people to take
عاوزاه.
away from this is to not give up and to resist
اه
and to follow your heart.
تفكيره، بس انا يعني قلت له على الزيت
That's
بس، عاوزين
important.
زيت.
That if you know that you
اتصرفي زي ما انت
want
عاوزه.
your person to come home or you need something
بقول لك انت رحت عند تيتا ولا لا؟
working up the levels and
رحتي عند تيتا؟
Oh yeah, you gotta work up the
طب يا حبيبي
levels.
المهم عمل لك
Like
سبلاستر
I
في
said,
المنازل
gang, continue to fight,
وعمل ليمونين ولا لا؟
continue to advocate for your children. It's
طيب
not an easy road, but you will
المهم
get
اتبسطتوا
there.
منه.
Susan told
طب
you
يا
a
حبيبي
story
ماشي،
over the last 40
ربنا يكون معاك يا
minutes
ساره.
of just what it
والعيال عاملين
took
ايه؟
in the last year to get her
طب يا
son
حبيبتي
home,
سلمي لي عليه.
all because
ربنا يكون معاك يا ساره انت
of,
وعيالك وجوزك ورجعك
and I
بالسلامه ان
hate
شاء
to
الله.
say this, gang, but
سلام يا حبيبتي.
of a minor accident. I mean, hello, we've all slipped, fell. It's all because, and I hate to say this, you fall the wrong way. Things happen, but imagine had they not gotten that taken care of. And it's sad to know that even like you just said, even though the surgery was successful, he'll have to contend with paying the rest, I would imagine, the rest of his life, right? And that's because is that be just so I understand all this medical stuff correctly, that's because of the fusion and all that? Or not really?
No, and he's an interesting, he's got Down syndrome, but he also has Ehlers-Danlos. So the quality of his bone, I think this is part of his problem. This is a big part of his problem, actually. So it's not just that the C1, C2, that instability that people with Down syndrome have to look out for. But for him, it's also that his osteoporosis. So when they try to fuse the bone together, the other bones are breaking. So it's just really heartbreaking to know that like you're fixing it, but the other pieces are crumbling. And then you can go fix that. Once you make one part stronger, the way they explain it to me is like you make one part stronger, but it puts too much pressure on the other part and it like makes that part kind of crumble. It's just really like I try not to think about it, right? Because that'll just keep you up. It'll keep you up at night, like thinking about whenever he's in pain or grabbing his neck or something like that. Is this like something very serious? Is this like another break? And the fact that we try to keep fixing, right? But you can't, I don't know, there's no fixing it. It's just trying to keep ahead of it.
No, and like I said, the work you and Mike did to contact the governor's office and do what you did to get the work that you both did, along with the governor's office, along with Phil Aronson, to get Alex home. You, like I said, gang, parents that are watching this, grandparents, guardians, you gotta fight for your rights, people. And if you don't know your rights, You can find out anything you ever wanted to know. Google Disability Rights New Jersey. Susan's been a big advocate for it. DRNJ would tell you anything you ever wanted to know. The New Jersey Partners in Policy Making program. I don't know if you've ever taken that, Susan, but that's also a very big one. Gotta gotta fight for your kiddos, people.
Absolutely.
Susan, if after people are done watching this, if they would like to connect with you, because you never know who's going to view this, how could they
Where's a
reach?
good place? I don't know. If you just start, if you're on Facebook talking in the Faces Autism group, I will pop up there. LinkedIn is a good place. I like doing LinkedIn. That's a great place too. A little bit of social media, but you'll find me. I have accounts across things. Not Instagram though. I don't really like Instagram too much. But those are probably the best places. But I'd be in Faces and on the there's New Jersey Special Needs Resources page. And I have I have a closed group that's like DDD, perform care, transition to adult. It's like every possible name so I could find people. And there's like 500 families there. And if you have a loved one who's transition age, 13, 14 through adult, that is such a great it's a closed group, so you can ask questions, and it's just geared towards New Jersey stuff and basic rights. What are our rights in adulthood and with DDD and with Medicaid and Social Security, all those things and all the conversations that we have, programs, resources, everybody shares and is like really helpful there. That's a really like a good group to join too. I feel like Facebook is just miraculous. I'm so thankful for that. That I get to communicate with people and that people are able to have followed our story and seen our story too, and help support, right? Support me. And I try to support other people. I always try to share information as much as possible because I'm like, that idea of like each one can teach one. You can, my lighting your little candle is not making me burn less bright. We can all learn and share the resources. I'm a big believer in that.
Yes, and you, if you don't mind, can you add me to that closed group, the Facebook group?
Oh, the name of it? Yeah, it is. Oh gosh, it's for real. It is like a crazy name. It's DDD slash perform care transition to adult life Facebook group. It's a terrible name, but I did it. I did it because I wanted people to, no matter what search terms that they wanted, that they use, that they would find a way to me. And it's funny, I started that group a few months before Alex went into the hospital, and now it's like 560 parents, and I make sure it's just parents. It's not people who are making money off of these systems. It's not service coordinators. It's not agencies. It's just parents who are asking for support and questions and help, and other people who are so generous in like offering answers. So it's a really nice group, and it's closed. So if you're asking a question, and you can ask a question anonymously too, because it is a closed group, but you don't have to worry about like it's a public post asking about some sort of like personal problem. So it's been, I think, a really good resource. And I've been happy and proud of that group, that we are able to each help and support each other with that.
Yes. Susan, thank you so much. I I learned over this last hour, I learned things that I never even knew. So thank you for this. I'm going to